that's good. Damn! But, we're back at it here discussing nucleic acids. So, nucleic acids, very important stuff in the body here. And first and foremost, they are a last resort for energy. So, first, we use up our carbohydrates, our glycogen stores. Then, once we run out of those, we can use lipids for stored energy, so triglycerides. Then after that, hopefully we aren't getting to this point ever, but I could use proteins potentially as energy. And last but certainly not least, once we deplete all of our other resources in the body, we will eventually use nucleic acids for energy, but that is not their primary function. Their primary function is genetic information. So we have all probably heard of DNA and RNA. DNA actually stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. So we're going to discuss a little bit more of these very soon here. I'm going to show you all a drawing which will hopefully help make sense of everything we're going to discuss here. So I change it over. Hi dear, my little dear family. But we're gonna change it here, and I'm gonna hopefully explain this picture properly. Pardon the third grade writing there. It's it's in my DNA. How about that? But so here we have. Yeah, we can see that. Pardon the shadow, but here we got a big ass cell. So cells are obviously much smaller than this, but here we got the cell, then here we got the nucleus. So this is the nucleus, this is the cell membrane here. So in the nucleus, we have these things called chromosomes. Chromosomes are composed of DNA and protein. So these chromosomes, there's little strand things, and then a section of each of these chromosomes, or a section of each of these DNA strands, that's what's called a gene. So a gene is a section of DNA, and a chromosome is composed of DNAs and proteins. So for protein, so gene, let's just start with that. So nucleus does contain this DNA, and obviously contains the gene, since the gene is a section of DNA. So genes, not the genes you put on your legs this morning, but genes, Gene, they store genetic info. They also contain directions for a single protein, for the production of a single protein. So a protein pretty much they control everything that happens in the body. So protein production, if there's too much or too little protein in the body, then things do not function properly. So these genes and DNA and protein production, extremely important stuff here. So this is the function of nucleic acid, is all of this genetic information here. So genes and consequently protein production are pretty much the starting point for all actions in the body. So what happens is this DNA, it's the inside the nucleus contains the DNA. DNA is too large to leave the nucleus, but the thing is, protein production happens outside of the nucleus. So inside of the cell, protein production occurs, but outside of the nucleus. So the question is, how do we get this DNA, which contains the directions for protein production, outside of the cell so it can produce a protein? Guess what? We have RNA molecules. So RNA molecules, it takes the information from the DNA outside of the nucleus to where proteins are formed, and then produces the protein that the DNA had the direction for. So here's how it goes. DNA in the nucleus translate or gives the information to the RNA, which takes the information for protein production outside of the nucleus. Boom, protein production occurs. So when we have names for these obviously as well too. So transcription is so just to run back through. So DNA or protein production occurs outside the nucleus. DNA too big to leave the nucleus, so RNA takes info from the DNA to where proteins form outside the nucleus, and it's called transcription. Excuse me. The process that allows for the conversion of DNA to RNA. So when the DNA here transcripts the information, if you will, transcribes the information to the RNA. That's called transcription. And when the RNA turns that information into the production of a protein, that's called translation. So translation is the conversion of RNA to a protein. So DNA to RNA, that's called transcription. RNA to the production of protein, that's translation there. So boom, transcription happens in here. Translation happens outside of the nucleus to where proteins are formed there. So hope that drawing did help there. Just remember, protein production occurs outside of the nucleus. DNA are in the nucleus. DNA control or contain the directions for the production of a single protein, but DNA too big to leave the nucleus. So DNA need to give their directions, if you will, to the RNA, takes it outside the nucleus, and outside the nucleus, the RNA translates that information to allow the production of a single protein there. So that's our intro section on nucleic acids. So the function is genetic information. The DNA and RNA are extremely important. Nucleus does contain the DNA, and genes are a section of this DNA. DNA is extremely important stuff. It contains the directions for the production of a single protein, but can't produce the protein inside the nucleus, and the protein, or the DNA can't leave the nucleus, so it needs to give that information, transcribe that information to an RNA, takes that information for the production of a single protein out of the nucleus, and that's where protein production occurs. So it goes from DNA to RNA, that's transcription, from RNA to protein production outside the nucleus, that is translation. And that wraps up our intro episode on nucleic acid, but wait, there's more.